So this is Immacolata, where I went to school, where I grew up. You've got the school here behind me. That used to be the convent back there. They've converted it into more school buildings. And then over here is the rectory. Now the rectory is important because that rectory, and then you've got the church. It's kind of that curved, swoopy building over my shoulder. The rectory and the church are where I was sexually abused by Father LeRoy Valentine. Now, one of the reasons I'm here is to give people a sense of the size of the rectory at Immacolata. So when I was here, there were three priests living here in this building. Monsignor Cornelius Flavin, then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, and my abuser, Father LeRoy Valentine. Here's the school with the gym next to it. The gym used to be the church, then they built the new church. This is the rectory here. So you can see the rectory is a relatively small building. You've got three guys living in there. Monsignor Flavin, Father, now Cardinal Dolan, and Father LeRoy Valentine. And one of the reasons I'm here, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, one of the reasons I came up here to Immacolata is because, so 2 weeks ago, I recorded a video with Michael Voris, an interview regarding an affidavit that I filed for a survivor friend who has told me he got it to Rome in a diplomatic pouch, and it got to the Pope. In that affidavit, I tell my story of not just my abuse by Father LeRoy Valentine, but how that abuse was witnessed, at least in part, by then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the man I refer to as my friend the Cardinal. You know, the abuse started in the rectory over there, and then continued on in the church, and the worst stuff happened in the basement of the rectory. And it's not easy. It's still not easy being here. You've got the big hill that we would play, kickball on, and Indian ball, and that kind of stuff. Today I learned that it sounds like Church Milton is having some financial difficulties. So I'm starting to wonder if my interview with Michael Voris is going to air. So I wanted to come up here and kind of give an overview of my testimony regarding Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York. Michael Voris and I and Church Milton and I don't agree on a lot of stuff. I was not thrilled with the thought of being on the vortex next to some of the other topics that are covered on the vortex. But children's lives are at stake. They are in danger. They are being put in danger by Timothy Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, a man who has nearly 1,000 priests under him and countless tens of thousands of children that he's responsible for. Kids like, those kids there, those kids down there, that's why I'm doing this. And kids, you got it better when we had it. It's a much better playground. We just had some swings and stuff. We didn't have all the deal and all the padding. If we fell off the slide, we fell onto the concrete. If we fell off the swings, we fell onto the concrete. But so the gist of my interview, the gist of my contentions in the affidavit that I filed, that I've been told made it to Rome, are this. My abuse and the abuse of others was witnessed at least in part by then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan. I don't know how he couldn't have noticed my abuse. Some people have told me, oh, Dolan just didn't understand what was going on. I don't understand how that's possible given the small size of the rectory there. Now, the stuff that happened in the church here, I don't have any recollection of anyone else being around. It was just Father Valentine and me, like in the sacristy, that kind of stuff. I don't blame Cardinal Dolan for not knowing about that. The problem I have with Cardinal Dolan is that he lived and worked for 2 years from summer of 77 to summer of 79 with my abusive father, LeRoy Valentine. I don't know how he couldn't have known what was going on, given how little precautions Valentine took to hide my and our abuse from the other priests in the rectory. There were 3 priests there living in a relatively small rectory. There were also nuns going in and out of there, the women going in and out of there. You know, the needs of the priests were completely catered to. The men really didn't have to do anything, which rubbed a bunch of the women raw, you know, as you can understand. You know, so far, my first memory of being in the rectory was for a Risk and pizza party that Valentine held. There were 4 kids, and my understanding is, I thought it was special. I thought that was a big deal. From what I understand, lots of people had a similar experience of a Risk and pizza party. You know, playing board games and eating pizza in the rectory. From what I understand, very little effort was made to hide that from the other priests, to hide what Valentine was doing from Monsignor Flavin or from Father, now Cardinal Dolan. And I don't know how Dolan couldn't have known what was going on, given that it was happening right in front of his face. But to one of the points that Michael Voris and I talked about in the interview, so one of the memories, and I talk about this in the affidavit, and I've talked about it before. I think I've talked about it on Sacrificed, I'm not sure. So I've talked about how, you know, people talk about grooming. Well, before grooming is testing, and one of the ways that Valentine would test you is he would wrestle with you and he would grab your balls and see how you reacted. He would just grab your balls while you're wrestling, and he would see whether you froze and did nothing like I did, or he would see whether you threw him off like the guy in the number shirt did. But then one of the later steps in the grooming process is Valentine would take you up to his room in the rectory. And remember, the rectories are full at this time. This is 77 to 79. The rectories are full. You've got 3 priests living together, Monsignor Flavin, Father Dolan, Father Valentine, all living together in a relatively small space. I don't know how someone could have 2 roommates, live in an apartment with 2 roommates, live in a house with 2 roommates, and one of those roommates is sexually abusing children in that house, in that apartment, in that suite, and not know what was going on. That just doesn't seem plausible to me. And one of the things that Valentine did, he made very little effort to hide what he was doing. I think the strategy of Monsignor Flavin and Father Dolan really was to just get the hell out of there, or to hide whenever Valentine was doing what he was doing to us. I assume they were around, but they weren't visible. I assume they were up in their rooms or in the TV room or some other part of the rectory. You know, and someone told me of a memory about 5 years ago. Someone told me of a memory. He described it as haircuts. I don't remember what the pretext was, but I remember being in Father Valentine's room, sitting on his bed, on the end of the bed with the door open, and Valentine is like holding me, enveloping me, playing with my hair with his left hand, and his right hand is on my leg and around my belt buckle and that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons I didn't react to that, why I didn't react at all, is the presence of Father Dolan in the rectory, walking around the hallway while that kind of stuff was going on, while Father LeRoy Valentine was sexually exploiting me, sexually abusing me, however you want to characterize, a priest with a boy up in his room fiddling with his hair. Someone has said that there was a pretext of a haircut. I don't remember what the pretext was. I do have this thing about my hair, especially this time of year. I have to cut my hair really short. One of the reasons I'm wearing a hat is because I have this thing with my hair because of the time of the year. But it was the fact that one of the reasons I didn't react more strongly to that memory is because into that test and that grooming and abuse and everything is that Father Dolan would be walking around in the hallway of the rectory, and on occasion he would walk by, see what was going on. And one thing you know as a kid is that, especially if you have more kids, your kids will react to something according to how you react to it. So if you don't react to it, your kids aren't going to react to it. And I think what happened is I saw Father Dolan's lack of a reaction to my testing, grooming, abuse by Father Valentine, and I didn't think it was a big deal because Father Dolan didn't seem to think it was a big deal. So I'm like, and when I talked to the review team for the Archdiocese of St. Louis, they asked me, how are you feeling? And I said, I felt ambivalent. On the one hand, I liked the contact because my dad was going through this phase where he thought it was emasculating or bad for men to have physical contact or for fathers to hug their sons. So he went through, for whatever reason, he got this idea in his head that it was bad for dads to hug boys. So I was craving attention and I got it from Father Valentine, and Father Valentine saw that vulnerability and exploited it. And the problem is, the really kind of difficult thing, the hard thing to process about that, is that then now Cardinal Timothy Dolan saw that behavior. How could he not? It was happening right in front of his face in the rectory he shared with Father LeRoy Valentine for 2 years. How can you live with an abuser who may have gotten 100 guys at Immacolata, who is running kids through the rectory at Immacolata, constantly taking kids on trips, kids. How can you not know that something is going on, that something is up? That is Cardinal Timothy Dolan's defense. That will be his defense should this come out. I don't believe it. You shouldn't believe it. It's simply not believable. I think simply what happened is that, Dolan may have mentioned something to Monsignor Flavin, and Monsignor Flavin told him to keep his mouth shut. And Dolan realized that if he could keep his mouth shut about what was going on in Immacolata, where maybe 100 boys were sexually abused by Father LeRoy Valentine, Dolan would be made. Dolan would establish himself as a reliable team player. And the fact that guys like then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, were promoted rather than punished for turning a blind eye to our sexual abuse, were rewarded for that. That points out the problem, the threat facing children now, the children in New York and the children all over the world throughout the Catholic Church. And that's why I say and believe Catholic children remain in danger, and not just Catholics and not just children.